In a vast wasteland of entertainment where radio has become obsolete, stands an embittered man teetering at the edge of sanity. With help from radio friends, he's about to embark on a global mission that would change the course of history as we know it. Broadcasting live from the secret studios on the banks of the Brandywine River in Delaware is Mitchell K.C. Hill. And up to the Great White North in Vancouver is Alexander Knight. And here we are once again to talk to you and have fun answering your questions. My name is Mitchell K.C. Hill. I'm an old-time radio guy. And the other gentleman here with me is the great Alexander Knight, who is the show producer, technical director, cattle wrangler, pixel wrangler, whatever you want to call him. Alex, what are the other jobs that you do that you don't want to talk about?
Well, I don't know if I can divulge that. It's good to be here, Mitch. Episode 35. This is the last Angry DJ, where we talk to industry luminaries in the world of broadcast. And I like to say that this is the show that is the intersection between old media, new media, YouTube versus terrestrial radio, podcasts versus YouTube. I mean, a lot of people say podcasts are dying and that YouTube is taking over. So that's always an interesting ongoing topic of conversation on this show about how all of this stuff is evolving and what needs to change.
Yeah, definitely. And as always, it's always a pleasure to speak with Alex. Today, we don't have a guest on. We have a guest whenever we have a guest. We just schedule them on as we can. We got a bunch of really cool people lined up that I can't tell you about. So you have to hang on until we get them all confirmed and in here. But today, Alex and I will be talking about various subjects near and dear to our heart. Today, we want to talk about things that make you go, And if you remember that from the song, and if you remember that from the Arsenio Hall show back in the 90s, you'll know that there would always be interesting things that people would try to figure out. They're kind of like you slap yourself on the head like, wow, I didn't know anything about that. Why is that? You know, for example, if somebody says, Mitch, what are those splotches on your forehead? Alex said, don't say it because nobody will notice it. But I got to say something. It's my skin doctor. Things that make you go, why do I have skin splotches? Is that when you get older, after spending a lot of time in the sun, no sunscreen, later in life, 20 years later, 10 years later, you can get these precancerous things, and the doctor has this bottle of liquid nitrogen, and he sprays it on, kills the cells, and all is good for another 6 months to a year. So that's what you have to endure as you get older and losing control of your facial expressions and how you look and things like that. Things to make you go, And I have a bunch of other subjects I love talking about in that area. But if we're going to talk about things that make you go, let's narrow it down focus-wise to things that make you go, about broadcasting. And one of the favorite subjects that I get all the time, people asking me over and over again about why do radio stations play a certain genre of music? How do they decide that they're going to be hot contemporary or adult contemporary music? Are they going to be CHR, contemporary hit radio? Are they going to be country? Are they going to be classic rock? Are they going to be oldies? How do they make that decision for each market? It always seems to be different, but there's always the same, subjects that come up as formats go. And if I were to count the number of formats that are called legitimate formats, starting with the adult contemporary AC area all the way through all these variations of it, there may only be about 6 or 7 legitimate radio formats. And what's weird about that is that worked well back in the day, let's say my day, that, you may have a choice about 4 or 5 different stations that you picked because you liked the music that they played or the personality or the branding of the station. But today, that's a whole different ballgame because now you can get whatever flavor you want in programming, on the radio, music, formats, TV shows. It's like there's no real cable TV anymore. You buy streaming service and you can pick whatever the heck you want. If you love sports, lots of choices there. But radio is still stuck in that concept of, well, we're going to do one of 4 or 5 different formats. Now, granted, there's exceptions to that rule. There's some stations that do something crazy like punk country or something weird. But the problem is that the more specific the format is, the smaller your potential audience sample is going to become. So how do radio stations decide in today's world what they're going to do musically? And that's something that has been a great subject for radio from the beginning. But there still seem to be using a number of paradigms that they used in the 80s and 90s. And I posit, I guess is the proper word, a good profit maybe, posit that they use a lot of the same methodology that worked for them in the 80s and 90s because it worked for them. So like today when they make the decision, well, we're going to do oldies. Okay, what kind of oldies? What do you consider to be oldies? Back in my day, oldies were doo-wop and 50s and maybe early 60s stuff. Could be Debbie, what was Debbie Boone's, Pat Boone or Walter Brennan. I worked at a radio station once where they didn't tell me the format of the station. It was WPEN. They were going oldies in Philadelphia. This is 1974. And they wouldn't tell me what the format, but they hired me out of Texas to come back up to Philadelphia, do afternoon drive. I was very young. I was about 18 years old. And I said, well, what's the format for the station? And they said, we can't tell you. It's a secret. So I came all the way up to Philadelphia. I was kind of up for the idea because I want to get closer to my ultimate destination, which was WFIL. And I found out pretty quickly that the format was going to be oldies, but really, doo-woppy oldies. And we had to talk and act like the old greaser disc jockeys did. And I was very, very disappointed at a young age because I was green, didn't know better, and I was angry about doing that kind of a format. But today, that kind of a format of music, they're not going to play 50s music anymore, not for the most part. You go to Sirius to catch that if you want to go 50s at 5 or whatever they do. And what would happen is that the qualification of what an oldie station is today is totally different than the way it was yesterday. So, Alex, let me ask you, when you think of oldies, what do you think of? What do you think of an oldies format?
Well, it's so subjective because it's like it's relative to. I guess if someone were to say oldies now and it's 2024, see, even that term to me, I think of like 50s and 60s music when someone uses that term oldies. Now, if we were to play music, say, from the 90s, which was a long time ago, we're talking about more than 25 years ago, that's pretty old. Do you consider that oldies? I guess for people now, that would be considered oldies. I guess the question is how far, I don't know, is there a rule? How far do you go back? What do you consider oldies, right? And by the way, I just want to take a second and say, if anyone has any questions in the chat, please just, don't wait. Just throw your question in there. We will get to it eventually.
Yeah, definitely. You're a smart guy. That you answered correctly is that the thing that changes the definition of an oldie is the typical demographic of the person that they want to reach today. So what was oldies for me is typically different for you as far as oldies goes. When you say 90s, that's about right. The new oldies these days, if you're listening to the radio, is probably the 80s. You wouldn't go much further back than the 80s. Maybe a sprinkling of 70s here and there. You're going to play a little Tommy James or, rock and roll from the Rolling Stones. But for the most part, it's changed. So it will constantly change. But there's a very, very tight window of opportunity when you have a new radio station. Let's say you have a brand spanking new radio station. It's very hard to come by these days, but you're going to try to decide, what are we going to play as music goes on our radio station? It's nothing. So if I were to point at you, Alex, and say, all right, somebody just, you have a distant relative, they just made you the gift of a frequency on the FM dial that reaches all of Vancouver. What would you do format-wise? What would be your choice? How would you go about picking it?
That's a good one.
Things to make you go,
I'd have to say I would go, I love a lot of, Mitch, my tastes are fairly eclectic, but I mean, I would definitely go back to the 80s and 90s a lot for sure, because that's a lot of the stuff that I listen to. Yeah, so I mean, a lot of different genres. Do we have to? Are you asking me? Do I have to narrow it down to a specific genre? Does it have to be rock, or can it be pop? Can it be electronic stuff? I mean, what are we talking about exactly?
Well, there is no correct answer for that because you have to do it, and then the ratings will tell you whether or not you did the right thing. And it has to be something that lasts a long time. There's
Yeah,
been a format that comes along from time to time that works well. Like earlier in my life, the Arrow format that CBS had, this is before they were Odyssey, was very popular, and they played a lot of 70s. Before that, Magic was a format that Greater Media put out there, and it was a collection of songs from the 60s and 70s. I don't think Magic would work today because it wouldn't be
right.
very magical if you played that. So to answer your question, I think you're right. As again, you're answering the question correctly. Is that you have to do a survey of your audience and find a niche that fits into the marketplace.
Yeah,
So if you were to say, here is the continuum of people listening in my particular market, let's say in Vancouver, here's their age is from here to here, or vice versa. What kinds of music would appeal to those people? And there are what they call safe lists. This is what a radio station would do. They would go out to a consultant, and the consultant would go to like the Media Base or some other program and say, what songs were the most popular with people
yeah, yeah. So
from the mid 70s?
yeah, and when I was in high school, by the way, I'm just gonna let's just see if because some people are commenting here in the chat. I just want to see if our chat comments will display here. Interesting. Okay, it's still broken. That's really funny.
Well, let's fix it
Anyway,
right now.
it's been driving crazy for the last 2 weeks. I've been trying to get live chat comments in here, and it just does not work.
Do it the
Anyway,
old-fashioned way. Just go ahead and answer them.
yeah, Mark Giuliani said the Stones. Jerry Hoyle was saying punk country question mark. I don't even know what punk country is. Is that a real genre?
It's a goofy joke thing. There's no such thing.
Okay. Okay. All right. I was just thinking back to the kind of music that people in my generation liked when I was in high school. So this would have been grade 8. I'm just trying to think. 19, was it 96, 7, 8, 9? I was in high school. So I remember back in the mid 90s, music from the 80s to everybody then seemed extremely old. And it seemed like music that their parents had listened to. And it's funny because as a guitar player, I loved listening. I grew up on listening to really, really old stuff that nobody else really listened to in high school. Everybody, in the mid 90s, they were listening to all the grunge rock bands and all the new metal bands that were coming out at that time. Smashing Pumpkins, Stone Temple Pilots, Nirvana, even Pearl Jam, all that kind of stuff. But I liked a lot of older music, and my people made fun of me for listening to stuff from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. That music's so irrelevant and it sounds so old. And it's funny too, they would even, because music that was produced in the 80s was produced a specific way, right? So it had a certain sound. And when people would hear that, they would say, oh, well, that sounds really old. They would equate that production style of, tons of reverb on the drums and tons of reverb on the vocals. They would consider that really old sounding. Yeah. It was dated.
Yeah, it definitely is dated. I think the only one that wouldn't stand up to any scrutiny anywhere is, and I lived through it, was the age of disco. While we went through disco, it was like there was a time where they put something in the water that made us dress really funny and dance really strangely, and it lasted, about a year? Maybe 2 years, disco as a format, and people don't tolerate it now. I mean, if you play disco music, your parents might start doing a stupid Elaine dance from Seinfeld, but it just brings back memories. But as a musical format, not really. I mean, I rarely listen to disco, but once in a while I hear it and I go, I remember what I was doing when that song was a hit. Was it a formative time in your life? So it might be a little bit of a time machine for some people to play older music. I think the only format that's really stood the test of time is classic rock, because it covers such a huge demographic and also time scale. From the 60s through the 70s and even into the 80s. There's not much classic rock in the 90s, right. Of the group. So it's a very interesting thing, but it's very complicated, and it involves, again, the demographics, which is when you discuss age strata that exist, and there's another thing called psychographics, which refers to your habits. In other words, what are your lifestyle habits? Were you a punker? Were you an old hippie? Were you a doo-wopper? You know, that's kind of like what psychographics do, and they can quantify that with the research. The research got more and more important, and we've discussed that at length with people like Tom Birch, who had a consulting company, Gary Berkowitz, who was on here as an AC aficionado, all of those things. So if you were deciding today, if you're going to do a format, the smartest thing you could do is to look for a hole in the coverage area. In other words, who's not being served. And if one is like got control of the market in a particular genre of music, but they're doing a lousy job of serving it, maybe there's room for somebody to come in and knock them off the top. But it's a whole lot harder. And it's a whole lot harder for a lot of reasons. A lot of the reasons have to do with the fact that people have a lot of choices now. And if they can't find it on the radio dial, they're going to find it on Spotify or Pandora or Apple or Amazon or all of the various and sundry music services. It's hard to avoid the fact that you can buy for, I don't know, $5-10 a month every song that's out there. So you can have this gigantic library. When I was a kid, I had a stack of 45s, and that's all I could afford, because you had to go out and buy them. I couldn't buy everything that existed out there. So you relied on the radio to be able to expose that music to you. So one of the problems that radio is dealing with today.
Yeah, and you talked about programming as well, and I had a brief experience with it because I had to learn how to do that job in school when I went to school for broadcasting and the campus had its own radio station with a very small antenna, very small reach. But I thought it was interesting when we would cycle through all the different jobs that we had to do. When I got to the programming job, it was weird having that much power and that much control as a radio station programmer to make decisions about what are people actually going to hear and shaping their listening by approving and not approving certain songs. Like a lot of the music that we would play on that station we tried to focus on mostly Canadian, but not exclusively, on lesser known artists, and we would accept submissions from virtual nobodies, and we would play it on the radio station. So I would have to check the radio station's email every single day, and I'd look at my inbox, and it was just full of people sending me, links to their music, and I had to make decisions about what would actually get on the air, and it was just weird having to make that kind of decision. I mean, I'm sure you could probably speak to the programming side of things, considering that you worked so long in the industry. You've worked obviously very closely with music programmers.
Did you have Canadian content rules in Canada?
Oh yeah,
programming?
Oh yeah, you had to watch that really carefully.
That was the thing where the Canadian government said, "Hey, look, we live right on the back door of the United States, and they have a lot of influence, but we're not going to allow them to introduce our culture completely." So you got to play a certain percentage of Canadian artists.
I think know what? I think that's great.
Anne Murray.
We don't want to ignore the local talent.
Yeah, and I think that's good that the government gets in where I guess it has to. But here's one of the fallacies that existed back in the day. When I was a student and working at the local top 40 station, I got a real good education about what broadcasting was all about and how you served your constituency. Most of the college stations had this idea that they would be so anti-commercial that everything that they did was not subversive, but it was so off the beaten track, where they would play humpback whales as an interlude, or they would play very obscure artists and expose them and play certain kinds of rock and roll that would never get played on the radio. And they were so good into that, and so much peer pressure associated with it. And I used to get attacked from students in college while I was still a budding new top 40 disc jockey, saying, "Why can't you play more of this or play more of that or more folk music or whatever?" And my answer would always be, well, we're a commercial endeavor, and our job is to reach as many people as we can. You may have a very small but loyal audience, but it doesn't work in the terms of reaching the most number of people that would move the needle enough to get advertisers. So, follow the money. That's the way it works. So that's one of the interesting things that we had to deal with. And even to this day, I mean, if I look up into Philadelphia, WRTI is a jazz, rather eclectic, different formats. And a lot of people love the heck out of them, but it's not a successful broadcast endeavor. If that's not their objective, that's fine. If they're exposing more obscure artists that never got a chance to be heard, they're doing what they intended to do. A weird thing about people, and I ran into this a lot, when I'd have like a person who had a little bit of money to spend and always wanted to be in radio but had no background in it, saying, I got this idea to build a radio station and I want to play my kind of music, which I think is great. I love it. I play it all the time. It's heavy metal, Megadeth, AC/DC, back in the day. And I want to play it, and it's what we're going to play. And I'd say, well, why? I said, because I love it. And I say, well, just because you like it doesn't mean that it's going to be a commercial success for your radio station. Because the minute you start playing what you think is great, you're narrowing your scope down to a very small, thin, scaz piece of the particular audience out there. It's just a phenomenon that I know.
I think
it was
it's
one of
fine
those things that made me go,
I think it's fine to niche though, because and it's not uncommon for radio station, at least my radio station here that I would listen to, is that they would do, for example, like a once a week thing at a specific time frame. It would be late at night from like 9 to 10. They would just focus on heavy metal, right? And so I think because that way you're not doing it all day. You don't maybe you don't deviate from the core, but then you satisfy those people that are loyal and want to hear heavy metal music for that 1 hour every single day. And it can work doing that.
Yeah, you're talking what we used to refer to as block programming.
Okay.
Is that different times of the day, at different points in the week, they would run something special and they would advertise it so you could come to. You had to know that there was going to be heavy metal at that time on the weekends, and you had to tune in for that specifically. As a commercial venture looking to gather as many listeners as you can, it's not a good methodology to use because you don't necessarily know what's playing just when you go hit the... Like when you have a format that's predictable and a brand that's predictable, you know that you can always hit that button or tune that station in and you're going to hear top 40 or country or heavy metal. If that was their thing. And a lot of stations would stay with that format because they knew that they were there on the dial and that people would go to them whenever they wanted that, and they didn't have to worry about the time of the day. It's sort of happening to broadcast TV now, or cable TV, or streaming media, is that when you're given the choice of watching whatever you want to watch, when you want to watch it, it's a whole different methodology that's involved here because it's not being served out as a linear progression of music. Remember, back in the old days, the only exposure you had to music was really coming from your radio station or from the jukebox at the club that you went to or the bowling alley that you bowled at. It was a whole different ballgame. So things have changed.
Yeah,
and
or the
mixtapes
that your friends would make and you would share and exchange that with. That was a great way to find new music too.
Yeah, when I go to my skin doctor, as you can tell, I was there recently. He has his own Pandora channel that he plays, and he knows that I like music, and he's always quizzing me as to, hey, did you just hear that song just played? And I said, well, you can't play Huey Lewis next to Aretha Franklin. It's kind of a weird train wreck. But he loved it. And the fact that he was going to pull out his sutures and all that stuff that they do when they mess with your skin, I would agree 100%. Whatever you want, Michael, whatever you want, play it. It's good for me. It's interesting. Some people like to express themselves by their mixtape, like you just said, or their Pandora channel or their Spotify. But when you really get down to it, people really kind of like somebody else doing that for them. I know this kind of flies in the face of tradition, but even though you have the choice of thousands upon thousands of songs in different genres and formats, it's still sometimes easier or better to have somebody else pick them for you. Like I'd rather listen to a station that played only the music that one of your favorite movie stars, a Brad Pitt channel. I'd be curious what Brad Pitt listened to on his mixtape. That would be kind of fun. And doesn't Apple Music do that? Don't they have like
They
DJs
do.
that are famous people?
Yeah, yeah.
Joe
Yeah, they
Rogan or
do.
whoever.
And you know what's funny? I didn't expect to see this, but just on my YouTube recommended feed, I saw this video that was Ryan Reynolds on Turner Classics YouTube channel, and he apparently he was working. We started working with him recently, and he's been helping curate content for Turner Classics, which I thought was really interesting. And I'm glad that you brought that up because I'm always interested in people that I'm interested in and what influenced them. Like I love finding out about creative people and what influenced them and how did they learn their craft. I always find that really, really interesting, whether it's guitar players or actors. Like who did they listen to? Who were their heroes? What did they like? And because I'm a big fan of movies as well. And any opportunity I can to find new movies or new music, I'm game for it.
You ever watch a movie and they play a song that's a different version of a song you're really familiar with? Like I
Yeah.
heard "Black is Black," and then all of a sudden it went into this disco riff. I got my Shazam out because I went, "Wow, this is a weird version of AC/DC," and it's like it's by some
Yeah.
artist. I wish I knew what it was, and I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." I kind of like that what they did there, their interpretation of it by
Yeah, it's
doing a
interesting.
sample.
I've seen that a lot on TV shows recently where they'll hire artists to they'll do a cover of a very popular song, but they'll do a completely unique, arrangement. And it's very different and it suits the vibe of the story. Whatever is happening in that moment, it is suiting the vibe of what is happening. And helping the story move along. So I'm always interested in, especially if it's good. I might not always like it, but I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah, and I another example of that. I was watching a series that was about 5 years ago with David Duchovny called Californication. It was
Great
on
show.
Showtime. Great
I love
show.
that show.
And every time that he, went back to his old ways and became self-destructive, or he was floating in his pool drinking beer and watching his life go away because something happened, they played this version of Rocket Man by Elton John that was a dub mix where they were doing a scratch in it. And I'm like, wow, that's a cool interpretation of a song that I grew up with, but very apropos to the scene and the circumstances. And I have that on my playlist now that I hear. It's from a 20, it's like a 2020 mix version of Elton John classics. And then there's another artist who I like. His name is David Arnold, and you may not recognize the name, but he's a English composer, arranger, and he's known well for doing Stargate theme. He's also the new artist that does all the arrangements for James Bond. And I wrote him a letter. I says, "Hey, I really like what you're doing," and he sent me this really cool mix of all the famous James Bond themes, "You Only Live Twice," "Thunderball," with different artists, current artists singing them with a completely different arrangement, and they were awesome. And I just sent a note back to him and said, "This is just amazing what you're doing. I think this is a
That's really cool.
perfect utilization of something that's so iconic as James Bond with a song that in the back of my head, I know that song, but now I'm hearing a freshened version of it that's more contemporary and more reasonable because I don't listen to Shirley Bassey every day, but I might hear it had Iggy Pop singing this song. It was like, wow, that's really crazy. Iggy Pop singing a James Bond thing. But anyhow, that's just me. So music has changed. People have changed. The media broadcasting has changed. It's not the same thing that it used to be. And again, this kind of gets to the crust of the crux of, did I say crust? Of what we're about here on The Last Angry DJ, because I kind of lament the passing of the way it used to be. And I kind of understand what's going on today, but Alex has a much better grasp of, how things have changed and where they are now. And we've mentioned this before. How does radio compete in this world now, where they're no longer or not as influential I think they just sort of have to grow up and deal with the fact that they're a little bit older and they can't do the things that they used to do. And please stop using the old methodology that used to work for you, because it's no longer relevant. Your relevancy has changed over the years. So how about a station that does remixes only? Remixes of popular songs, like the example of Elton John I just mentioned from Californication. By the way, you gotta check it out on YouTube. We can't play it because we would get flagged, but do a search on it. I think you'd be very impressed to hear a more contemporary version of Rocket Man, a song we all grew up with, done completely different, and it's really neat.
Yeah, and it's a great show. I mean, remixes are popular. They've been popular for a long time, but I don't know. I mean, radio's not really the place to do it, I don't think. Because again, I don't think people are really listening to a lot of music on the radio now. That's anecdotal. I don't have any numbers or anything to back that up with proof. But if you just look at the amount of people that are using streaming music services, that's clearly the direction that we're going. I mean, look what's happening to the movie theater industry as well. There's less and less people going to the theater all the time. They're struggling to pay their bills. Theaters have closed down. They've had to lay off staff. So, there is a big change going on right now across multiple industries.
I think you're right. And I think it's good that you point out multiple industries, because it's not just radio has changed. Everything has changed. Every day I read about another restaurant chain that used to be huge is filing for bankruptcy and going away, or a giant retail chain that's going away because Amazon has killed them. Do you step in as a government to say, well, Amazon, you need to be broken up into pieces. You're too big. There's not enough competition out there. Maybe not. I mean, it's free enterprise. It's the world we live in now, and you want instantaneous gratification. If you forget, a long time ago, when I used to order something, I'd be lucky to get it a week, 2 weeks later. Now you can have it that afternoon. I mean, are we starting to take that kind of stuff for granted? Do we expect the radio stations we listen to today to be different and provide different kinds of music? And again, going back to that example of Californication, I didn't hear that on the radio. I saw it on a TV show, a well-done TV show that I respected because of the writing, and the subject matter was very contemporary. So that they took something old, because he was an older guy that was trying to deal with today, which is a recurring theme here, and rewrote it to make it more contemporary. Maybe we're all just going through some growing pains. There's a correction that's going on now that's affecting everything in the media, everything else out there, how we shop, how we eat, how we interact with each other. Zoom, for example, and doing podcasts. I mean, this would be considered black magic. Even in my early days of broadcasting, to be able to have this conversation for me and you between Port Coquitlam and Wilmington, Delaware, would normally, back in the day, would have to be done by a dedicated landline or a satellite. It's magic.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I think I think there's more interest in talk radio, and I know I spend far more time listening to talk radio than I do listening to any kind of music radio station. I think the whole format of just playing music and very little talk is kind of going away. I think there's still a way to keep an engaged audience in talk radio. There's certain things you can do on talk radio that you can't necessarily easily do in podcasts or other mediums, and I think there's a place for talk radio still. But music radio stations, I would not want to be a radio station owner that just did music right now, to be honest with you.
Well, you bring up a good point, because it's a different world that we live in, and again, there are so many people that used to be in radio, like myself, saying, and I need to get to doing a streaming radio station because I have such a unique perspective on music, and it's all this great experience. And they're so hung up on the idea that they got to create this station that's unique and branded and put some jingles on it and play some
Right.
music and have a computer system play it back. That just because they do that, it's a license to to print money. It's not like that anymore. You could go to all that trouble to create that individual radio station, and all you're really doing is a mixtape. Essentially, that's what mixtapes were about. They were much better because you could distribute it amongst your friends, the people that shared maybe some of your interests and things like that. That's very specific. But as a distribution method, I think streaming radio is also got its set of challenges because, first of all, the music companies don't want you to do it, so they're making it hard for you to do it. Pirate radio stations, they're having their source of trouble. The FCC starting to jump on them. It's a whole new world out there. Do we have any interesting chats that are coming in?
Mark Giuliani brought up a great point. He's saying it's all about the talent and throwing your knowledge around the music that you're playing. And I'm glad you say that because I love people that, I really admire people that have that incredible music knowledge, but how many of those people are still around? There's not that many people, and you got to pay those people really well to do that. And that's the problem. There's just not enough of those kind of people that have that kind of knowledge.
So it's a good point. I was producing some concerts for a friend of mine. I had a chain of Harley Davidson dealerships, and he was bringing in artists that would perform. And the biker, lifestyle allowed them to bring in some of the artists that we refer to as classic rock. And they had, for example, one time we had a group in called the Classic Rock All-Stars. It was made up of Jerry Corbetta, who was with Sugarloaf, Green-Eyed Lady, remember that? The guy from Fine Young Cannibals, and I forget some of the songs they did, and another guy that did the song Ride, Captain Ride by the Blues Image. That was Michael Panera. And I had a sit down with Michael, and it's amazing to talk to people that came from that era that are still going today, and they still find that there's an audience out there for the redoing of their music because it's nostalgia. People love nostalgia to a degree in the right circumstances, but they were very interesting in what they had to say. And I'm thinking, first of all, Mike could talk about anything for any length of time. Mike should have his own show. He should curate his own program over on Sirius. I know that Daryl Hall does that, doesn't he? Daryl Hall, John Oates, or Daryl Hall has his own Daryl's House or something like that. He's got his own program, and it's been going very well. I had Foghat in, was one of the other concerts it did, and talking to Roger Earl, one of the original founders, maybe the only one that's still living, and the information and the stories that they could tell. I even brought up Mungo Jerry in the summertime. He said, "Oh, Mungo, yeah, Mungo and I used to do this." And I'm like, wow, this is really cool because you're hearing another aspect of the music that you grew up with that you didn't have that perspective. So one of the other things, and I think you brought it up before, Alex, that a radio program that was done by somebody who really lived the life of the music that you were playing, but could also tell the backstory of how they recorded the songs, like the group that did it and how the intro that was so unusual was found. And it was a blues riff that they used to practice his guitar with all the time. And somebody said, "We need an opening for the song, but hey, what's that thing you do to warm up with your guitar?" And they go, "Yeah, let's try that." And that becomes the recognizable intro for a hit song that's been around forever. It's a classic. So all those stories better get told because those people aren't going to live forever. That's another problem that I have right now. That like a lot of the boss jocks that I grew up with and worked with are no longer with us. They've passed on. Every year there's another story about another guy that's passed on. And I'm lucky. I was very young at the time when I was a boss jock. Now I'm starting to pay for it by being the last man standing. Oh, the last angry DJ.
Yeah, Mitch, this just actually reminded me because I've been meaning to ask you about this, and this is somewhat on topic too. But phone calls on radio stations. We're talking about how do you keep people engaged on the radio, and we were talking about I was talking about talk radio earlier because I think that's still vital. And as much as, audio nerds like us may not like the call quality, I still think that is a valid thing, and that is by far still the easiest way to bring somebody into your show. But what do you think about just having random people, like having the capability of having people in our live chat, or just to call in and just quickly voice their thoughts on something?
It would be interesting. I think that the challenge will be to get rid of the trolls. As we get more popular, we're going to be more trolls out there to deal with. So you have to have somebody curate the callers. It's just like watching Frasier on TV. He had Roz on there answering the phones and saying, "What do you want to talk about?" In all the talk shows, they have somebody there that that's pre-interviewing these people,
Yeah.
and then they come on and they go "Baba Booey" or some other crazy thing, and it's like, let that one go by, So there you go. But you got to understand what the phone calls were back in the day was the only way that a station could interact on a semi-live basis with their listeners. This is before social media. Remember, there was no CompuServe or network or internet. We would reach out and talk to our listeners, and some of the listeners were good listeners that could ask very important questions. Others were just there to get their voice heard on the radio. They were, what do we used to call them? It was a derogatory term, but people that would call, and we'd call them contest whores or some crazy statement.
The thing is, I know there's newer technology now, like you can have Q&A systems and stuff like that, which is all fine and good, and that's great. But I still think it's kind of fun to have people, like, to hear their actual voice on a show. I mean, when I listen to Howard Stern, he has call-ins all the time, and sometimes funny things can happen on the air like that, live.
I would suggest that most of the funny stuff that happens on Howard Stern is planned out. It's faked. It's not spontaneous. And I can tell you that even when I was doing it way back when, some of the bits that we did on the phone that sounded like it was a caller calling in, like I get somebody who would call and say, "Hey, Mitch, are you the same guy that whenever I ask you to do something, you laugh strangely and then you hang up on me?" And I'd go, I mean, a lot of those things were set up. And to be honest with you, the idea that the radio guy was just standing by waiting for you to call our hit line and request a song so we could immediately get on and play it so you can hear the song you requested playing on the radio. We didn't like to take requests because it interfered with our system of computerized or programmed out, songs that got played in a certain order. So, but people had this idea that they had control of the radio station and they got to hear their voice. They got to hear their favorite song. Most of the time it was just luck that we played it at the same time they asked for it.
You lulled them into a false sense of security there.
Well, we weren't working on their security. We were working on the fact that we were listening. That it was an interactive medium, which it really kind of was and was not. So anytime we could get a good caller on that would praise the radio station as being, "It's my favorite radio station. I listen to it all the time. Great, thanks so much. Let me play Billy Don't Be a Hero." "Oh, okay, thank you very much. Let's do that." Or I'd say, "Hey, if you got a request, write it on the back of a $20 bill and send it to 1700 Philadelphia, PA, WFIL or whatever." It was like, it was fake. Most radio stations that ask for requests really don't want it. That's the reality.
That's funny that you mentioned that, because I'll never forget back in high school. My sister's 2 years younger than me, and she was trying so hard to call into this 95.3 radio station to get her song request in. Phone rang and rang, and she stayed on there for a long time. Finally, somebody picked up, and they sounded really irritated to finally get somebody on. They're like, yeah, what is it? And she says the name of the artist, and it's like, yeah, okay, all right. And they never played it.
Yeah, because you're sitting there playing top 40 radio, and the callers are all asking for the same 5 songs, and it's like, I don't want to play Ben by Michael Jackson right now. Thank you very much. You can't come right out and tell them, "I just played that like 10 minutes ago. You want to hear it again?" And it's like, the whole idea, it was a little bit of a PR move to have a request line. I still remember the request line here from 40 years ago. It was 302-764-5300. Don't try it now, by the way. I have no idea
You got a
what it
little.
belongs to.
Am I hearing a little PTSD there that you still haven't quite recovered from?
No, I have not. I have not. So taking request was, it was just a gag. It really, truly was. It wasn't real. We didn't really. But once in a while, we'd put somebody on. Usually because they'd say, I want to hear, Hooked on a Feeling. And, okay. And then I'd record it, and then I got Hooked on a Feeling coming up here in about 10 minutes. Then we queue up the request, and that would be, hi, can you play Hooked on a Feeling? And I go, uka chaka, and boom, it would be playing. It sounded like it was a continuous thing. They asked for it, I played it, and there it went. But it wasn't. It was orchestrated, so it wasn't all real. Probably still isn't.
Mitch, did you were you ever a fan of Art Bell's show Coast to Coast? Do you know who that is? It's like he had a paranormal themed radio show that was quite popular. It had a lot of call-ins too.
Vaguely remember. Is that the alien abduction guy too?
Yeah, it was when I listen to archives of that show. It's so funny because some of these people, he'd have them on the show on the phone for so long that this one guy would call in. He'd be like chasing this thing that he saw in the sky, and Art Bell. It was really entertaining.
Yeah, it's more entertaining because the people that are calling it's like watching wrestling. Is it real or is it fake?
Yeah.
We all kind of knew it was fake, but it's kind of entertaining to watch the things go. It's like watching that guy. Who is it on MSNBC? That takes the calls in the morning, and he'll be saying, "Okay, caller, you're on the air," and they'll be saying the most outrageous stuff, and that person keeps a totally straight face. The person's saying, "Baba Booey," and he goes, "All right, thank you for your input. See you later." And he'd keep a straight face the whole time while they were like insulting him or bringing up obscure, crazy stories about, did you know what happens if you mix Coke and Pepsi together? It can cause an atomic bomb. Just outrageous stuff. It's just funny to hear how stupid people can be. And let's face it, when we watch YouTube bits, usually it's something stupid that happens. Somebody hurts themselves in some outrageous way. They show it happening, but they don't show the ambulances arriving after the fact, the crying family.
Yeah, of course.
The dad who dislocated his neck or something. I don't know. It's just crazy.
Mark Giuliani just surprised me. He said apparently the Coast to Coast show that Art Bell used to do, he says we carry it, and it's now called Coast to Coast with George Noory, and apparently it's the same type of show. So I guess he passed the torch on now that Art Bell's gone, and they're still doing that show. That's very interesting. I'll have to find it
because it's probably tying into something that everybody like. Have you ever thought? I mean, just for a second, have you ever thought that maybe you were abducted and you just don't remember it? Have you ever thought that?
No, I've never ever thought that.
You never considered that you might have been abducted?
No. I was afraid of the concept of being abducted as a kid. I'd watch these things on TV of people telling these stories about how they thought they were abducted, and that's creepy music playing. And when you're 10 years old watching this at night, it's scary. You have nightmares of it. I mean, sure, I'd have nightmares.
Do you believe in aliens? Do you believe they're among us?
I don't believe they're among us. I think that considering what we currently know of the universe and its vast size, that there is a strong likelihood in another galaxy that is completely unreachable, that there is life, that there is intelligent life somewhere. It is very, very likely, but we'll never see it. We'll never see it.
The statistics indicate that it could happen. And the other thing with on the subject, things to make you go, is that not only is it a big place, the universe is a big place, that there's also the time consideration is that maybe it was 1 billion years ago that there was an intelligent race that could have visited us, or maybe they did, but they're not here now because a lot of these, what do they call them, type 1, type 2, type 3 civilizations, that some of them may destroy themselves. Certainly we've come close enough. And there's a lot of evidence, too, that there are cataclysms that can happen. Now it's starting to sound like a Joe Rogan show, that happen every so often on Earth that resets the planet. Some we fly into some comet-strewn part of the solar system, and it causes another ice age, or you can see the geographic evidence of that. But anyhow, it's a subject for another conversation. I think these shows are interesting if they tap into something that's an ongoing, conversation. That's certainly it. We could get into politics and discuss why some candidates are more popular than others.
Yeah, let's not
because they
do
tap in. Yeah, let's not do that. I agree. Let's not do that. There's plenty of other shows you can go to that have plenty of conversation this close to election time here in the U.S. So let's talk about other things. But a talk show, a well-done talk show where they have entertainment and educational content, I'm all for it. I think, Mark, you probably know a hell of a lot more. I don't do it because I have that short attention that I can't invest that much time, and I just can't stay engaged. It's just kind of weird. So what are you going to do? Even our talk show, I wonder sometimes, well, what happens if I freeze up during the show or just flat out run out of conversation material? Is it just a long pause while we sit here and stare at each other and look for people to luckily I can talk about just about anything, but do you ever feel that way, Alex? Do you feel like, wow, we're stalled? What are we going to do now?
Yeah, it's happened to me. Not on this show, but yeah, absolutely, and it's very awkward. It is
Well,
very
this
awkward.
show is organic in that we don't have a specific criteria of things that we follow, for the show. I guess
Yeah.
we could plan it out, but we wouldn't compare the show to like Office Hours, which is driven by the questions that are asked by folks through Makana. That's like there's a script right there for you to follow. We don't have that kind of feedback. We've got live people that are regulars on our program that are in there asking their questions. We love to hear from them. The best way to do it is when we're live, obviously, because you can't chat with the show after the fact. I've noticed on YouTube,
or use this QR code that you're seeing on the screen.
You're just itching to get that out there.
Absolutely, I got it working this week. Yeah, absolutely. If you scan that QR code, that will get you into our Discord community where you can continue the conversation at any time, of course. And I will leave that on the screen for just a minute. Mitch, can I tell you something that really, really angers me? That really pisses me off.
By all means, you've picked the right show.
Because this drives me, I don't know, I haven't thought about this in a while, but this conversation has triggered this. One time I had somebody as a guest that I invited on my podcast. Didn't really know him that well. I wouldn't consider him a friend, but sort of like followed. He had his own show that was definitely had a bigger audience than ours. And live on the show while we were recording, he basically, I was ending the show or something and giving us I was saying our normal spiel for the outro or whatever. And he basically insulted me with the way I was doing it and said, "Oh, you're doing this wrong." And I'm like, don't ever tell me what to say on the show. Like I had to tell him after we were done, but I'm like, what do you think of that? Well, you get a guest on the show and then suddenly they're just flat out insulting you about how you're actually operating on the show and what you're saying. Like, you should never do that, right?
It's highly unprofessional. Like when you have a lot of people together, like doing a show, and I won't say that it was smooth sailing every day when I was on Office Hours because you got a lot of personalities involved, and sometimes things would happen where people would get angry for whatever reason. You got to be a professional, and that is the show goes on, and you don't do that on air. That's like an unwritten rule. So, whether it's Office Hours or this program or whatever show you're referring to, for somebody to bring in that kind of inside baseball or a beef in front of everybody is very unprofessional. It's rude, and it's not the way you want to do it. Unless you had a show about being rude and unprofessional, then maybe it's
well,
appropriate.
I can tell you that we certainly did not, and it stunned me that somebody would do that live. Like that was the one and only time that had ever happened. I could not believe somebody just directly insulted how I was performing live on the show.
You bring up an interesting point, is that you read about stories about actors in popular TV shows or radio shows where people that you were just convinced that they have a great chemistry and they're getting along great, off screen hate each other's guts and would find any opportunity to stab the other in the back. And when you hear that, you're like, wow, that is really wild. Why do they continue doing that program? Obviously, they're either under contract or they have a lot of money at stake or they don't want to upset their audience. I think that that's fascinating that kind of stuff goes on. I do want to say that this is very real on our program. If something happened that either I did or Alex did that upset the other or went too far, and God knows I can go there, that we keep it real enough that you could just say, wait a minute, you just said something that I don't agree with. Luckily, that hasn't happened, but if it did, I think it's kind of cool to resolve the problem by talking it out right here live, because keeping it real is very real. And I think it's an educational lesson, and it's also a good cathartic for the participants to work that out, because I really hate to have a argument or something that was done that's bad or that you have a beef with and then walk away from it and come back to it at a different time. I'd rather get it out, because there's enough things in life that screw our heads up that we carry that feeling around 100%. With us. So I just think it's great that we have a mutual respect for each other. And I don't agree with everything that Alex does, and I know that he can't possibly agree with everything I do. But I think that he shows a modicum of self-respect and respect for me, and I know that he's looking out for my back. So it's good that exists.
Sure thing.
That's a chemistry you can't find everywhere. It's just a magical chemistry. So we have a magical chemistry, and that's good. And if you're doing a talk show, it's great ingredient to have. But it was we suspected, and I'll say we because it was a mutual agreement, that when I was thinking of the idea of doing a podcast, I was thinking, do I do this by myself, and can I sustain a hour and a half or whatever we do length show myself? And then when I got to thinking, Alex would be great because he represents a completely different point of view, and yet there is some shared interest in what we do. We like the media. We understand. There's a chemistry there that just like I suspected, and I think that Alex suspected it would be a good matchup. And we've done 35 shows, and it does work. So we're here to make it happen. And then when we ask, please hit the subscribe button. We're up to 125. We'd like a few more. It makes us feel better when we leave the show, and we have. So if you haven't done it yet, Alex hates it, by the way, when I do this, when I plead for subscription or followers or likes. Please just hit it, just to give us a little endorphin rush or a little bump. It's good. We're not looking for money necessarily. We love coffee. We'd love you to go do that. How do they do that, by the way, if they want to reach out and say, hey, we like your show. We think it's worth a cup of coffee once a month? What do they do?
Absolutely. So you can go to patreon.com/TheLastAngryDJ and become what we call a coffee supporter at just $2 a month, which I don't know anywhere, Mitch, where you can buy a cup of coffee now today with inflation at $2. If anyone knows where you can, maybe a gas station can even get gas station coffee for less than $2. I'm not sure you can, but for $2, it goes a long way to helping us continue to do this show.
I never drank coffee, so can it be like a ginger ale or a lemonade?
Wait, how am I learning about this now? You don't drink coffee?
No, never did. Never developed.
God.
Well, think about it for a minute. Maybe you developed a taste for it, but when you really stop to think about it, it's this bitter, hot liquid that you drink in the middle of the summer. What's the point of it? At least chocolate milk or hot chocolate has a little kick to it. There's something there. But it's same thing with Coca-Cola. It's like it's a cola bean. Would I eat a cola bean instead of a grape or a lemon or an apple? It's just weird stuff. Anyhow, it's just something we grew up Hey, some cool comments and questions coming in. Chad Lafarge is there with us. Does he have anything that he wants to say to us?
Chad Lafarge, yeah, he says, my K-Cup machine at home costs about $1.17 per cup. Yeah, but Chad, you're cheating. You're at home already. I'm talking about going out and buying stuff.
Would he send us a K-Cup?
How is that K-Cup machine? Chad, let us know. Mitch, you got one of those things? See, I do the manual. I like to do the slow pour over the... I got a Chemex coffee pot. You know,
the squeeze thing where you got to squeeze down on.
Well, that's an AeroPress, but I use a scale. I measure my coffee. I measure my water, so I get it precise. I want precision, and I want to be able to reproduce the same cup of coffee every single day.
Do you have a water filter like a Brita or something on your faucet?
I use filtered water as well.
Okay, I used to have a guy with filters on my radio show all the time. And it was a popular show. And I used to tell him, I said, I got a great slogan for you. He's like, what? I said, buy a filter or be a filter. And he said, that's great. I'm going to use that in my book. And it showed up in his book, and I didn't get credit for it. So I was kind of upset. But yeah, filtered water is good for you. By the way, they show that distilled water, a lot of people do that. They distill water is bad for you because if you drink distilled water straight, what it does is it absorbs all the electrolytes and minerals and stuff that's supposed to be in regular water, and it actually steals it from your body. So drinking a lot of distilled water is bad for you. So that's something that I read somewhere. Things that make you go, you'd think that distilled water would be good for you. Filtered water,
I also don't
great.
like demineralized water. Don't like demineralized water.
What's
Why
that
do I
mean?
want to remove the minerals from my water? I don't understand that.
Yeah,
you know what I like, Mitch? I like glacier water. If you had glacier bottled water, that stuff's good.
Yeah, if you
Very
like
pure.
penguin pee in it, it's good for you.
Okay, well, I never had that thought, but thank you.
Did you know that when you get bottled water, the color of the cap will determine where that water came from? Whether it's
Where'd you learn that?
Like you say, I don't know.
Is that from National Geographic?
Maybe. But the color of the bottle cap, if it's blue, it means one thing. If it's white, it means something. If it's red, it means something else. Most of the like the New York soda water or whatever it is that comes out of the city, they're pouring that water out of a tap. They might be filtering it slightly. But by the way, New York City has some of the cleanest and best tasting water in the world because the distribution system that brings the water down from the Hudson, from the glaciers and whatever else upstream, is extremely good quality water. Other areas, not so much. Like I grew up in Erie, Pennsylvania, part of my life, and the water from Lake Erie was definitely not the water you want to drink. And around here, we've got a couple of dams, and the river that runs right by my house, the secret Brandywine River, where my studios are. Everything upstream, and there's a lot of agriculture up there, a lot of cows peeing and doing other stuff. And fish, they pee too. They're just taking that water right out of the river and they strain it maybe through a cheesecloth or something like that. But I drive by the water plant. The water pumping plant is also right next to my place. And sometimes there's some strange odors coming out of there. So water, it's a good subject. Thank you, Chad. Appreciate your question. Reproducibility is the key to the best of everything. I'm not sure what the K-Cup.
Well, we were talking about coffee, and I was talking about how that I use the Chemex, and I have a scale, and I measure everything, so I got to have that reproducibility to have that consistent tasting cup of coffee, which I think, and Chad brings up a good point too, I think that is a good mindset to have when you do anything in life, is to be precise, to be able to have that reproducibility. You do need to have certain things in place, whether that's having the right tools to do this show consistently every single week or whatever it is that you're doing in your job or life.
Thanks, Chad. And Mark Giuliani reminds me that the DuPont company, big chemical company, is based here in Wilmington. Also, is there stuff that the byproducts? Well, they have the experimental station. It's on this side, and then the deep water plant on this side of me on the river. Maybe there's some stuff in there in the water that's left over from DuPont. I just say that any bad stuff that I may say or do on the show is because something that's in the water. There's a Stephen King novel in there somewhere. So thank you for that reminder. The worst thing for me is that the Interstate 95 bridge also goes right by my condo here. It's probably more crap from byproducts from automobiles that I'm inhaling that are a whole lot worse for me than anything
all that
else.
black smoke that they spew out of their tailpipe, all those big semi trucks, right, on the highway.
Yeah, the Cybertruck, when it goes by, spewing lithium ions out its tailpipe. That's probably affecting me in some horrible way. So, anybody else have some commentary? By the way, great to have some of our old friends on checking us in. Jerry Hoyle, Mark Giuliani, Chad Lafarge, Laura Thompson, and Chad's got something else. Microplastic, yeah. The idea that there's plastics in all the water we drink, that doesn't get me terribly excited. If it's inorganic like that stuff, where does it reside in your body? Where do microplastics reside? Does it clog up your kidneys? Is it just carcinogenic by virtue of it being there? What they're saying is that these pieces of plastic that are in our environment get broken down so small that it literally is a part of everything that we consume or eat or drink. So what are you going to do?
Well, that's a frightening thought.
Yeah, thanks for that one, Chad. Whew. Great stuff.
So
that was our show about things that make you go, And I don't know if we accomplished that. Yeah, that's the pose right there, what Alex is doing. So we appreciate that. Working on a couple of great guests, and there's one I really want to tell you, I'm excited about possibly having on the show. He owns a bunch of theaters, IMAX theaters. So we'd love to have him come on and talk about what's going on in media and how you continue to remain relevant in the world we live in today. I'm sure I'll hear back this week about when he can schedule one of his visits here. And a surprise guest that said that they would like to join us in the spring. I can't mention that guest either yet. There's a bunch of people I can't mention. So when we don't have those folks here to be on as a guest, it's just me and Alex chatting about anything that our folks want to tell us about. And again, there's a lot of ways you can reach out to us. The best way is to use that QR code that pops up every once in a while right there. You can put it over to Alex if you want to. There it is. There it is. It's over here. I get to see it. The QR code. We should have a song for that. It's the QR code. And you can scan that and make things happen. That's about it for our show. Alex, you have anything else you want to add before we wrap it up for another program?
Just want to thank everyone in the chat for being here, for watching and supporting the show. We really appreciate you guys showing up every single week. And, of course, share it with a friend if you know somebody in the industry who's a technology nerd. Share the show with them. Just a reminder, this show is also available as an audio-only podcast on all platforms: Apple Podcasts, Google, TuneIn, Stitcher, Amazon Music. It is available on all platforms because we like to leave it up to you to decide, how do you want to watch this show? Do you want to watch it on YouTube? Do you want to listen to it? So it's available everywhere at your leisure, and we don't expect everyone to show up every single week for the live show. So you know what? You can just download it, listen to it when you got time.
When you got time, and that's the way it is. Like, some people want to come here and join us live, get close to the source of the glacier stream of water that we throw out there. Others want to have it after the fact. I don't know if we'd end with a green cap or a blue cap. Check that out next time you go to the grocery store. Check the caps on the water. I guarantee you there are different colors on there. They mean different things. Thank you so very much for joining us. I know a little bit of nonsense, but that kind of makes what our show is all about. But if you look between the lines, we covered some very deep subjects about what's affecting the broadcast media today, and all kinds of media. But today we kind of focused on music and people's tastes that have changed, and the fact that it's a moving target. It's changing as we get older and as time goes on. So who knows what will be happening 20 years from now. It may be a completely different beast, maybe all on demand. I have a feeling that linear delivery methods that do things in a linear fashion are going to run out of favor, and it's going to be people deciding, I have time for this, but only this kind of stuff that I'm interested in. Because there's such a fire hose of information out there, I've got to choose what it is that I want to see and what I want to hear and what I want to be influenced by. So thank you so very much for joining us, all your chat. And, of course, the world's greatest producer, Alexander Knight, who you can see over in office hours, hosting Audio Wednesdays and answering some of the questions during the week. We'd love to see him doing that. And we'd love to see you here again next week at the same time. And if you're listening only, great. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Take care of yourself and be safe.